when I first did try to write a longer piece of fiction many years ago after my first Arvon retreat, I spent ages trying to get that first chapter right. You know, you hear about it's got to, you know, got to catch the first line's got to be important, the first chapter. But I spent so long on that first chapter, and then I eventually got away from the first chapter, moved on. By the time I'd finished that draft, I went back to the first chapter and thought, I don't need that, and started on something like the fifth chapter. You know, and it made me realise that actually getting the story down was, for me, certainly with the way I write, was going to be more important. And I do now try to do a lot of uncritical writing, either with pen and paper or pencil and paper, or typing, just getting the story out, the ideas out, and without editing, and only going back and editing it after I've got quite a lot down.
I think it's much more common when you're writing middle grade or young adult fiction to have a rough sense. And obviously it depends on your drafting process. My first drafts are usually quite a bit shorter than the final one. And some people do the opposite, and they write really long drafts that need to be cut down. So I guess it's just finding your process. And obviously the age of the reader is going to really depend on, you know, the length that they can manage. At the moment, I'm writing lower middle grade, and it has to be no longer than 20,000 words. So that's a real discipline for me, because that's much shorter than I'm used to.
I like to do lots of different sketches. So if I call them sketches because I think of the sort of, if you think of like a very big, like impressive painting, like Maddox Ford's work, where you've got loads and loads of stuff going on, a lot of the time artists will do sketches of sort of individual bits of that, so they can see how someone's going to hold their wrist, or how they can see how somebody's going to stand, and that may or may not make it exactly into the final sort of version of it. And I think that's a really sort of handy metaphor to use for writing, is that sometimes I'll see, okay, what would happen if these two characters who never meet in the real novel just met in a supermarket? And that kind of sometimes gives it a bit more energy to the process, I find. And yeah, just give yourself permission to write stuff that only you will see, that only is just for the process of writing. I found that really helpful. For the first draft, it can never really be too raw. I think that you need, often the point of a first draft is just to make you feel like you could do it. So really, you just need to get it done and not worry about how good it is. There's no such thing as a first draft that's not good enough, because it doesn't have to be any good. And I think that novels are kind of like people, in that they need safe childhoods to go on and be functioning adults. So if what I did with my first draft was I just told myself, no one's ever going to see this. It's completely okay. You can experiment. You can change your mind halfway through. You can try different types of perspective. You can do all sorts of stuff that you will definitely not be doing when you come to show your agent or your publisher. And that really helped me, because it made me feel, it sort of took a lot of the pressure off, and I could just try stuff. And it was completely fine for it to be very, very raw, because I knew that later down the road, I was going to edit it and do absolutely everything I could do to make it the best I possibly could. I know for myself, I never ever want to show my work to anybody until I know that I've made it as good as I possibly can myself, partly because it's always a bit more disappointing if you get negative feedback that you already had anticipated in your mind. And also because if you are, especially if you're paying for a service, you know, however good the value for money is, it's always going to be better if they're telling you stuff that you don't already know. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely not. I mean, we welcome quite young groups of children to Lumbank, and obviously right to the opposite end of the spectrum, plenty of octogenarians come through Arvon at Home and Lumbank and the rest of the organisation. I think your time is your time. Some people don't want to get published. Some people just love the act of writing, whether it's their family story or whether they're angry and they're channeling through poetry. Others, you know, have a story to tell, and there is a time. And it's got nothing to do with age, but a lot to do with privilege and permission, and just having that little bit of time.